Hi, my name is Jordan. I am a special education teacher from the UK. I share my passion for everything communication, sensory regulation, and fun lesson ideas for my classroom of disabled pupils aged 4 to 11. Each week, I am joined by experts in the field, answering your questions and sharing our knowledge and experience working alongside our beautiful young people. Let's get started. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Sensory Classroom podcast. My name is Jordan. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by Eliza Fricker, an illustrator and a huge advocate and consultant for PDA, autism, and learning. She has published several books, and we're going to be talking about the school environment and the impact of that on children and families today. Hello, Eliza.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You are so welcome. I've really been looking forward to this. I adore your illustrations and I adore your social media. I suppose, are you okay introducing yourself in a way of what came first? Was it autism advocacy? Was it illustration? Was it author or something else?
Yeah, it was definitely illustrating first because that was my processing of the experiences we'd had. So once we were at home and we were no longer able to go to school, I definitely had quite a lot. I'm happy to admit this now. I had a lot of rage at the time. I was massively disappointed with how things had gone. I could see some elements that could have been done better, but I think sending emails that were very emotional that I was sending was quite exposing for me at the time. I realized I was sending these emails and they were kind of, often not even getting a response, or I would get a very kind of unemotional response back. They weren't able to sort of offer what I was looking for. So that was kind of quite a quick learning lesson for me. And so the drawing was a way that I could process that stuff, those experiences, but that felt a lot safer. I'd always been an illustrator anyway, so for me to sort of have to stop doing what I loved because my child was now at home would have been really impactful for me anyway. So kind of shifting it into something that had a purpose was just a really helpful tool, and it felt quite a powerful tool at the time because I sometimes look back on the illustrations now and they look quite angry because I was angry. They've sort of shifted now, I suppose, a bit over time as I've, healed and come through that. But I think it's really important to address all those emotions. And I think parents need to know that there is a space to do that. And we didn't have those spaces when I was going through it. So it was certainly the illustration first. And then as time went on, I sort of made connections and people wanted to talk to me. And I think people realised that I was kind of a safe space to do that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you all right explaining a little bit about, you said you were let down. Are you all right talking a little bit about what that entailed? Because I have so many parents listening to this podcast that are exactly where you were at then, and they, I'm sure, relate to that and that feeling of letdown, anger, lack of any. I mean, yeah, you said emotional feedback, but it's almost just any care or being treated like a human almost. It's very robotic, and yeah, I've felt that firsthand, and I'm sure parents can relate to that as well.
Yeah, I don't think there were sort of many actual human beings that were sort of causing harm. I think it was more the sort of bigger issue of the system. We did have one, I won't name, but I could name one specific person who was very much centered on their job and was very unemotional at a time that was hugely emotional for us. I now realize that they had caused quite a lot of harm for other parents as well at that time. It wasn't just us. But overall, I didn't have that. Luckily, I didn't have a specific person or difficulties with lots of people. I would say the local authority element is very difficult. And I would say when you're dealing with trying to sort out an EHCP and you're trying to sort out your provision, when you're dealing with caseworkers, that is very difficult because caseworkers are just admin assistants. They have no knowledge of neurodivergence. They're not there to hold that space at all for distressed parents. And that is very traumatizing because it's an exposure of yourself at the rawest time and you're not going to get anything back that supports you.
Yeah, and for parents, that is that also that layer of advocating for a young person that can't necessarily advocate them for themselves. So you're sharing your voice as your family, aren't you? Because it's having an impact on you and your family, but you're also their voice too. And the responsibility of that is massive. And I don't think local authority understand the weight of that, of advocating for yourself and for your child.
No, and I think people might think it's a bit kind of woo-woo to talk about trauma informed, but I think when it comes to the local authority and that side of things, I think it would be so helpful for parents to have some of that. I think, teachers and other professionals, ed psychs are much more aware of that, and often you've built up a relationship with them, particularly in primary school. So they are able to hold a little bit more for you in those difficult times. And you will meet some that will really go the extra mile to do that. We had a brilliant educational psychologist at the time who really did do that and was brave enough to hold those difficult times. But yeah, the local authority, you are literally talking to a cardboard cutout at the hardest times in your life, and
Yeah,
that
they're
is very
just so
difficult.
I mean, their caseloads are
Their
crazy.
caseloads are huge, aren't they? And they burn out themselves. That's the other thing. You'll see the turnover. Parents will talk about, you're emailing one person, then they leave and you'll get someone else because their caseload is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, why you would ever take that job on, I have no idea.
I don't know.
I know in Cornwall, I can't speak for where you are, but in Cornwall, I think each caseworker has about 18,000 children on their caseload. I mean, you couldn't possibly know their EHCPs, you couldn't possibly meet them or even understand or remember the details of it. Really is as black or white as this date, that date, and they're just
Mm.
meeting the bare minimum. I mean, not even that, honestly, because the times are going over and over. I've had 4 year sixes leave now without a school placement, and there's just been this just abyss of nothing.
Yeah. And it's strange, isn't it, when you've been under that enormous pressure through that sort of attendance narrative, and then
Yes.
once you drop out, there's this cruel irony that suddenly there's no one there rushing around to find you a school
So
place.
true, and having to meet the EHCP, yeah, having to get their attendance, having to justify all of these time out, even though they're completely justified because there's hospital visits and all sorts that come along with these diagnoses. Yeah, it's so true, and maybe that is where some of the anger feels from. It just feels so unfair. There's no leeway when it's us that are not meeting their requirements, but then when they're not meeting their legal requirements, there seems so much time and leniency, and we have to be so patient, and it all ultimately affects the children that we love most in the whole wide world, that can't advocate for themselves necessarily, and it's just all fueling this fire, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean that fire is passionate as well when you're the parent and you're seeing your child be let down. That is there anything greater than that, I think, than wanting stuff for your child that isn't happening?
No, and it's also I mean, it's so unfair. I've seen highly intelligent, educated women. I've seen lecturers that are parents of these autistic children without a school place, and they are writing eloquent letters and doing countless research, and it's all cited and honestly beautiful. This thing that I've seen could be published. It is fantastic. And yet it made no difference. So in my mind, when I was seeing this happening, as the teacher, the helpless teacher, just so wanting to hold these families and hold this local authority to account and seeing it all happen in front of my eyes and being completely helpless, only to just be the face of it all, I suppose.
And I talk about that a lot, the sort of the trappedness that we have as the parents and the trappedness that the teachers and professionals have by this system. We're all kind of trapped by it, aren't we?
I suppose what's the answer? Complete reform. Is it?
Yeah, and I
No.
think giving back more autonomy to schools and to teachers, so
Mm.
allowing teachers to make more flexible curriculums based on their class and the needs of the children in that class, and bringing teachers in for the skills that they have and why they wanted to be a teacher. I've got family members that were teachers all their lives, and I know they said by the end of it, it was a very different thing to what they had started out wanting to do. And they were both of the family members I'm thinking of at the minute, they're both very, very creative people. That creativity was something they brought to that class and brought a joy to those children, I can imagine, because they certainly brought a joy to my life. But they said by the end there was no time for any of that. They weren't able to bring that, and that makes me really sad.
Yeah, what a loss. Are those creative? Because I could imagine you're incredibly creative. Is that some of the benefits that you noticed, even though you would, of course, rather a specialist provision and education system that suited your child, it obviously wasn't there, which is why you were at home. Some of the benefits of that, I'm sure there are lots of benefits of being at home, that ability and to be creative and fit that in, whereas teachers maybe not have the time to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I think that engagement for particularly neurodivergent students is very based on interests. And we do see there's some schools doing that. If you look at things like democratic schools or self-directed learning, that's what the principle of it is based on, is looking at those children's strengths and working towards that. Now, I can already hear the grey suits with their lanyards on saying, well, how are they going to get a broad curriculum doing that? Well, actually, you can
Yeah.
shoehorn a lot in by working around their interests first and foremost. And I know that because we had a tuition service who did very much that when they came to our house. So
Yeah,
it's doable, but obviously
it was
you've got to be creative with it, haven't you?
absolutely. I was a foster carer and we had virtual school coming in, 2 hours a day to support our child who was out of education. A very similar story. You know, there wasn't a suitable place and that kind of thing. So I've seen it from teacher and parent kind of point of view, that frustration of wanting to advocate for a child that had already been through so much. But yeah, absolutely it's possible. They were really into Marvel at the time and they managed to shoehorn it into writing. Math, you just have to be creative, don't you? But it felt like play to him. It felt fun and motivating to him. There's also so much trauma around these children and education if they have been in a tricky situation, a wrong setting, and for the parents actually. So being able to almost mask and disguise learning through what feels really safe and good to them might help rebuild some of that love of learning.
I think you're absolutely right. I think when there's trauma involved, it has to feel different. That is so essential with it. If it feels like school, when I speak to families and I think we all are conditioned so much that we think it's home or school. And then we think that home, we replicate school in the home. There's never going to be engagement doing that. If there's trauma to that school environment, it has to feel completely different. And that's how we heal from that. Because when we have these new experiences that feel different, we start to think, okay, this is okay for me. This feels different. This feels okay.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And actually, there's a kind of archaic understanding of what that schoolwork is even looking like. I often see lots of paperwork and lots of pencils and writing. And actually, that isn't what my teaching looks like for lots of my learners. It doesn't look like paperwork at all. In fact, I think I get the prize in my school for doing the least photocopying, which the SLT love. Because there just really isn't much on paper at all. And if there is, it's for my team, it's not for the kids. Just because of where they're at, it's all puppets and toys and songs and musical instruments and tangible physical items that we can mouth and chew and
And I
manipulate.
bet they remember that. You know, they'll remember that stuff. I
But
don't remember so much from school because it was all writing stuff down and remembering dates and, numbers and
which works for some learners. I've also worked with other neurodivergent learners that work really well. They have an incredible memory, are classic academic learners, and they like bookwork, paperwork, pencils. It's just not what my class is like now. But I suppose that's the point, right? It's about individualizing that learning, and the benefit of specialist education and home education is that we get the luxury of doing that, because ultimately every child would benefit from that, I
and it's
suppose.
strange, isn't it? Because it is a service for children. Yet their autonomy in this is so, well, small, isn't it? And actually, what we should be thinking about is for these children, so much of their learning is about what's in it for me. And if we start from that place, like you said, if they're creative, we go that route. If they're more academic and pen to paper, we go that route. But we don't. We just don't look at it that way.
No, it's one size fits all, and maybe because there's now 30 children in a class and, you know, you have to just do it one way and then adapt from there, and it does feel odd to me. I would be a rubbish mainstream school teacher, honestly. I went for one interview once and, it was a reception job, so I thought, "Oh, that's creative, I can do that." And even just in the interview, I could just tell it wasn't diverse enough for me, it wasn't individualized enough for me. They were celebrating the high achievers and wanting to show me their books, and all I could focus on was the 3 clearly autistic learners that were fidgeting in the corner, that needs weren't being met, and I knew right then that actually I'd be lost here, you know, my skills would be wasted here because actually I just care about these 3 children whose needs aren't being met. And that's when I knew, actually, no, I need to go back into special education.
And your energy levels doing it in a way that didn't inspire you either.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, we are like that, aren't we? Even as adults, we work best when we are inspired and motivated and when we're passionate about something. I can imagine, I mean, bringing it back to your illustrations and your books, they're of such high quality and so profound for other people because they're profound for you.
Yeah, you need that emotion behind it. And I think that's so true that you can really see the difference between when you're really into doing something and when you're not. I used to get like that used to happen to me even when I went to art college. They could clearly tell when I wasn't into it. It wasn't because, I wasn't able to do this stuff. I can draw but they could just tell. And I used to get really frustrated because I think, God, I think I've really won them over with this. Um, pulled the wool over their eyes because I was trying to get out stuff I didn't want to do. But they could tell. You can tell when people aren't into stuff.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I feel like the neurodivergence in us as well, it's even more obvious. Like for me, I can really, it feels magnified for me in comparison to my husband, maybe, that I really do need to be passionate about something, and then it's hyper focused. I'm to the point of I'm obsessed with it. I can't let it go. I have to do it. But also on the other side, if I'm not interested, I just can't make myself do it.
No, and I think also the other element to that is the interactions with the people that we're involved with within that doing that project. So I'm thinking about I've had some recent things with a work thing and it's just not gelling for me, and I can't pull it out of the bag because the communication is different with the two people involved in this all of it. I'm just like, I can't pull it out of the bag. Whereas the other people that I work with, I've got a fantastic editor and people I co-author with, it just flows, there's no problem to it whatsoever. And I can see that now so clearly. So for our children, imagine being around, adults, teachers that they don't have that relationship with, how difficult that must be for them.
Yeah, I suppose that's the answer, isn't it? For teachers listening to this, like, how can I replicate this? I'm a mainstream teacher. I've got first student. How can I replicate this? I get it. I can hear what you're saying, but how can I replicate it? It is about connection, isn't it? And that relationship building. I had a chat with somebody on the podcast recently and said, just take 5, ask 5 questions. Do you know 5 things about the child that is nothing to do with their learning, their levels or anything? Can you name their pet? Do you know what football team they support? Do you know their favorite food? Make sure you do, because if you don't, you're not gonna know enough in how they learn and how they work and just their relationship, honestly, to actually be able to teach them effectively. And I thought that was really great advice.
I think so. And I think it's got to come from a really authentic place. I know that word gets bandied around, authenticity, but it's something we feel, isn't it? It's a genuine thing we feel. Is this person just box ticking here, or are they genuinely interested in me?
Yeah, and everybody can feel that, can't they? And my non-speaking, high support needs learners can absolutely feel that. You can see that we all doing intensive interaction, and yet the adults that are really trying hard to find what it is that they're finding so interested about this stimming toy compared to the ones that are just mimicking, they get such a different response. It's
That's really interesting.
totally. It looks the same. Everybody's, mimicking, but you can really feel it. It's tangible almost when an adult is really trying to enjoy what the child is enjoying. And I can't put my finger on it, but my goodness, the child knows totally. However high support needs they are, you get such a different reaction. It really is about that investment of energy, I think, in what they're interested in.
Yeah, and what would you say about the difference in communication styles as well? Sometimes I think we do just have different ways of communicating and they don't work together. I mean, that's human nature, right? Isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, different ways of even how you're positioned. There's so much nuance in it, isn't there? Are you too close? Are you kind of looking too much? Are you not looking enough? Are you touching, not touching. Yeah, everybody's different. And it is about knowing that individual, which again is such a luxury in special education. I really, really do know my learners like so well. I have them for 7 years for a start, which is just incredible. We're really part of the family by the time they leave us. And I wouldn't want it any other way. I can't imagine not having it. I can't imagine having it any other way.
But that's you've got that time, haven't you? Look at how much time you get to invest in it. That's an
Yeah,
amazing
and less
thing.
children as well, so it's more concentrated, isn't it? And I'm just not the right person to, I suppose, tell mainstream teachers how it is possible because I haven't experienced that. I know it is possible because I know some teachers do it really well, but as for strategies, I don't know because it just feels like a lot, doesn't it, when they're already
I think
struggling
that
with that.
that relationship underpinning it though, because when Naomi and myself and her sister wrote What Can We Do When School's Not Working, there were schools within that mainstream system that were really going out on a limb to do things differently. And a lot of the underpinning of that was relationships. And like we were just saying, it's making those students feel like they've got a sense of worth, really. They mean something, and I think we all need that as humans. We all need to feel that we mean something to people, even if it looks different. Maybe when mainstream school is focusing too much on those results, well, the ones that maybe aren't going to get those results, still putting the sense of worth and putting a bit into that relationship anyway, but in a different way, not looking at it because they're the grade aspect.
It's so true. I saw one of your illustrations actually, I think you posted it recently about the measure, and almost like what we're measuring, and I loved that because it's so true. Mainstream are so on measuring attendance or measuring levels or like it's but actually maybe that's not the real data here. Maybe we need to measure relationships, I know you said, or measure creativity, measure trying. I hate the attendance thing anyway, but I loved your illustration of that because it's so true that we just need to change what we're focusing on. So often it isn't even up to the children about attendance for a start, or it's about their medical needs, or it's about parent setup. It's nothing to do with the child. So they shouldn't be publicly shamed as on the not on the 100% attendance register or these awful traffic light systems that we get in classes, which still exist. Teachers always DM me when I mention them and say they don't exist anymore. They do. I've seen them. People have traffic light, awful public shaming displays of who's on green and who's on red and who's on this. And I just think we're measuring the wrong thing. What if we were to measure kindness or trying or really knowing their body? My learners really know their body. They really do advocate for themselves. They are incredible at that. They know exactly what their bodies need. Why aren't we measuring that? I think that's a wonderful
I
skill.
mean, I have to draw that. I'm going to have to draw measuring trying. I think that's such an amazing, I actually feel really emotional hearing that because we just don't really think about what children are struggling with underneath and how hard they might be trying. And I think that's such an important thing. I've just finished my follow on to Thumbsucker about my childhood, which is my secondary school years, and it's called Could Try Harder. And it's all about that because I was a top set student, but they didn't see how hard that was for me. And so there was this constant push, 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 and I was never quite enough. And that's really impactful, because they're not seeing what's going on underneath for those young people. There is an assumption that they can just get more out of you. And I think, if we actually just, celebrated people for where they're at a lot more than we do.
Yeah, and it's classic female neurodivergence, isn't it? That fawn response, that people-pleasing response. And for teachers, they look like, yeah, model student, always doing well. But the problem is you are asking so much of them, and the bar keeps raising, I find. That, okay, they've got 99% attendance, we want 100, or they've got this score, we need more. We need more quiet, more responsible, more still, more focus, there's so much pressure. And I say females, I hate to say that, but it is so common with females. And the problem is that they are burning out. They're burning out at home, they're burning out afterwards. It ends up as school refusal. It looks like eating disorders, any way of trying to manage their body and have a sense of control because they cannot hold it together anymore, it leads to school refusal,
Well, and I
expulsion.
think that's a really important point because a psychologist has written the afterword to this book, and it was really hard to read as she sort of unpicked this story of my adolescence going through this. And I think what you're saying is really important is because what we're not looking at when we think about school is that school is a short term investment. And for parents, we're looking at a long term investment in our child. And we need to see that how impactful that can potentially be long term. This is why we have women doing too much, women doing parenting and working and doing the housework, and it's still happening. And it's particularly ramped up for neurodivergent women because we have become, like you said, the people pleasers and perfectionists. Ultimately, we must be what that sort of message sends of not good enough and you can try harder is that ultimately we become these people that try and be everything, and that's not sustainable.
Oh, and it's setting up our young people to be incredibly vulnerable in situations, either a work situation. I've certainly felt that relationship situation. If you're constantly people pleasing and ignoring your own gut feeling about a situation in order to please others, to be that perfect response, that can only put you in a really vulnerable position. And we certainly don't want that for our young people. I don't think any schools, local authority, or parents would want that for their young people. But that's kind of what we're asking them. We're asking them to ignore your body, ignore what feels good for you, ignore that you need, it starts out with ignore that you need a movement break, ignore that you need the toilet right now because you've just been, and all those things. That's what we're asking them to, which on the surface seems like, well, yeah, of course that's a big thing. But then what that turns into as adults is ignore that whistleblowing thing that you probably should have counted. Ignore that safeguarding issue. Ignore when your boyfriend actually isn't talking to you very well or treating you very well, because actually they're the authority figure and actually your job is to just ignore your gut feelings. And I think that's incredibly dangerous. And I can see it happening in the team I work with, my teaching assistants. I can see that in all the way filtering down all through the mainstream school that I'm attached to. I can just see that language and it starts with attendance. It starts with sitting still and focusing, but it really is incredibly dangerous.
Well, it creates a complete disconnect from your own self and needs, even in times of deep distress. So, of course, that leads on to very harmful things as an adult. Yeah, this is why these things need to be lifelong. This is lifelong learning, what we're kind of advocating for, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose if you've got trauma at school, then you've almost learned that learning isn't for you, it doesn't feel good for you, and then you won't look for more. Whereas how maybe I'm doing it in my class and you're doing it in your home, that kind of special interest subjects, child led learning, it breeds that sense of love of learning, lifelong learning. It means that there'll then be adults that will research things, look things up, be open minded, be open to change, open to grow. That's the kind of world I wanna live in.
Yeah, and I think I haven't had a huge pushback about it, but I definitely have had some parents sort of ask me about my child returning to school and, why did I
The
do
ultimate
that?
aim,
What's that?
like, that's the ultimate aim, or
Yeah, and they sort of thought, "Oh, why have you done that? Why have you put them back into something?" But I made sure it was a very different environment, and the point as well of that is that I wanted them to have that experience to be a positive one ultimately, and to know that there are other ways of learning and it can feel quite different. That was really important actually. I think after a few years of being at home when they were well again, but I could see we needed something else. And I could see that that experience of being away from me was also really important at this next stage.
absolutely. There's so much more that's taught at school that is way beyond academics. I think that's actually more important. I think, a intellectual home, you could do all that stuff. That's almost not the thing that she's learning at school, but it's those social skills, isn't it? It's those rules, it's being part of a community that isn't part of your home community. There's so much more that's taught at school that are the benefits of that, I'm sure. What's different now that compared to before?
In the new setting,
What kind of things were you looking for, I suppose, to ensure her safety in that?
I didn't actually know what I was looking for at the time. I got some advice a very, very long time ago by someone from the PDA Society. I don't know if they still have this, but they did have a kind of phone line that you could call. And I spoke to someone there and she said, look at everything out there, just look at everything. Um, and it was a really good bit of advice that I've carried on and I share with families now, because looking at everything means that you can start to formulate a picture, because often you don't know what you're actually looking for your child. You could even be kind of sending long emails to your caseworker about, wanting provision, but you've got no idea what you want. And I was certainly in that position. So going around and looking at what was out there was really important, because then I could see the bits that I did like and I didn't like. And I'd also now had a child at home who I could really see was unmasking, and I could start to build a picture of actually where they were at and what their needs were. Because I talk a lot about this kind of residual masking, I think, goes on with our children, that even when you have them at home, it takes a long time for that mask to come off, because it's been going on for so long within school. So it was a combination of seeing that sort of mask come off, seeing her needs, plus looking at other things out there. And it was such a broad range, because, you've got mainstream and specialist, but there's so much going on within both of those.
Everything's different, isn't it?
Absolutely. And so it was actually, for all our kind of grumps about the local authority, we'd been at home for quite a long time, and I couldn't see. I'd seen some things, but nothing quite right. And I was thinking, well, we're going to have to do a OTAS.
Mm.
But we were at a stage where we were both kind of plateauing. This comes up quite a lot with families where you've been at home for a long time and the energy's running out on this situation. And I was going through OTAS, didn't really feel like we had many other options. And then it was the caseworker that said, have you thought about this setting? And I thought, it's going to be rubbish, because I thought if the local authority are offering it, it's probably rubbish.
And it's going to be rubbish. Yeah.
Because I'd seen a few of their other options before and they were rubbish. So I went full of cynicism to this setting, and it wasn't even near us. It was sort of like a good 40 minutes in a taxi. And I went in really kind of prepped for this, with all my child's needs, and shown round by the head teacher. And as we were walking round, I started to sort of soften and think, this feels really nice and this feels really different. And just the way she was interacting with the children and what she was saying. And she, at the end, she said, look, we're going to make mistakes, but we'll say sorry and we'll figure it out. We'll work this out.
Love
But this is
that.
about parents being as ready for this as the child. We can't take your child if you're not ready for this, because it's not going to work. And by the end of that, I broke down and I was completely in bits. And she said, I don't think I've seen someone this emotional about this before. And I said, it's because I feel like I can let go. I've been doing this for so long.
Holding
I
all the
need a
responsibility.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was like, I need a break. And I actually believe they could do it. And we are however many years down the line and they're still doing it. I'm not saying it's perfect. And this is part of the healing process. She was absolutely right. We have to be healed ourselves. We have to be ready for this. We have to allow there are going to be bumps. I mean, we've had some real bumps along the way with this
You've got lots
setting.
of trauma and triggers built up over your daughter's education system and your own too, haven't you? It's
Yeah.
all this big amalgamation of stuff to work out. Yeah.
Yeah. But part of the next step for us was taking that risk and allowing her to start accessing the outside world. This wasn't a rush. We'd had lots of time at home, but the world was out there, and I'm just there to kind of shimmy along next to her and give her those opportunities. But that's part of it. Being a parent is to offer those opportunities as well, but obviously only when it feels right.
Yeah, of course. I definitely felt that when I was at home with my child in foster care. It was wonderful because I got to spend so much time with him and we knew each other incredibly well. But it was a lot ask of me looking back to be the parent and the teacher and the advocate and at times the social worker because they weren't doing their job and all of those things. It's a lot to ask of one person, and it definitely impacted my relationship to just be the parent, which was ultimately m my actual job to be.
Absolutely. And I see that when I speak to families, and they will, like I said earlier, there'll be this sort of plateauing. So you'll see it where everyone just kind of has reached a point, they're kind of a bit over it, you know? Um, it's very hard to keep that energy up. I mean, Laura Kirby, who I write quite a few books about PDA with, she runs a tutor company, and she said, you know, it's the same with her tutors. She has to change it up because energy level to sustain that is incredibly difficult doing it all yourself at home. And I think also when you've got a child who's 10, it's very different when you have an adolescent. Naturally, for adolescents, they want to start to move away from us and they want to
Right.
have different opportunities, and it starts to shift.
Yeah. And you
And
want
so,
that. You want
yeah,
them to feel
of
confident in
course.
the world and in their own selves, to be able to have that independence. And I suppose for you, that was, finding at that right school. And for others, it might be joining a group or something. But I mean, for any parent, you want as much independence. I mean, let's be careful here how we say this, but as much independence or as much fulfilled life as they can have within the realms of their disability and diagnosis.
Yeah, and you know, even I mean, I still get asked it now. The really generic questions. Well, are they doing GCSEs or are they doing A levels or you know? And I'm so far from that that I don't even think about it. In fact, someone asked me not long ago. So do they do like A level stuff? And I was like, I don't actually know. I mean, that sounds
It doesn't matter.
it doesn't
Yeah.
matter because they're so interested and safe and happy when they're there.
Yeah, and I can tell you that any school, if she wants to and is ready, she will be able to do it. If she's not ready or can't for whatever reason, she won't. And I can tell you that now. I don't even know the school, but there is absolutely no school on this planet that if a child is wanting to and ready, that wouldn't put them through something. Like if they wanted to. Yeah, so I can tell you now. It's how wonderful that the school is not pressuring either and that she's
No,
not
and I
pressuring.
think what's really lovely is when you find something that kind of mirrors how you're doing it. So, you know, they're very side by side with this learning journey rather than, you know, telling what to do. And that's a wonderful thing because that's kind of how I'm doing this parenting journey as well. So it's the offering, it's side by side, and it's curiosity, but it's certainly not, you know, with any expectation to do something.
And having that communication, open communication between parent and school, I can imagine is incredibly important for your healing journey as well. Making sure that you are invested and you know what's happening, why it's happening, and that they can even say that they're doing something similar to you and that you know that must be really helpful.
And just getting positive emails back, you know, and this isn't toxic positivity where, you know, you're really in the dumps with everything and they'd send those emails and you'd be like, well, we've had the worst week. I mean, this is genuine stuff. And I often share, there's a presentation I do and I often share the first school report that we got. And, you know, a lot of it, you know, a lot of it's emotional to read it because it's all strength based. And when you know that about your child, but no one else gets to see it because the environment is so impactful, it's such a wonderful thing when it's actually seen by other people somewhere else.
I suppose that's
That's the biggest thing, I think, when other people see your child like
absolutely.
that.
Totally, because since birth, you've maybe been the only one that's fully understood them and seen them for who they are. And there's weight in that too. There's weight in love and trauma, isn't there? There's weight of it all. And yeah, I can totally relate to that. I've had conversations like that with parents of you actually get it. Like you understand their voice. You you get it. And also somebody to be able to celebrate the small wins with. Because actually sometimes your own support network or your own family don't even really get it. So
Absolutely. And honestly, we treasure those people. You know, we absolutely treasure those people because it's so few and far between that there's other people that get to see our children just how we see them. And it was funny actually because I've started to talk a little bit about love now, and people think that's a bit funny to talk about another environment other than you as the parent showing love to your child. But honestly, I see that in that setting. I see
that's
they
really
love
sad to me that that's not expected. It actually makes me quite teary thinking that that isn't a thing.
I know.
I call my class my kids, like, for a reason.
Yeah, and they'll know that. They will absolutely know that.
It
And
actually
I
does make me feel quite teary thinking that a setting would have a child, even if it's just for a year, and not love them just breaks my heart. But I
but
know
you
it
can
happens.
feel it when it's there. and you know when it's not there.
Yeah, and the children know, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're paid for. Like, why are you in this job if you aren't loving the children? Like, surely that's the fundamentals. Like, surely. Or
And
even
I
like,
think that goes back to what we were saying earlier, when it feels like you're kind of never meeting that mark, you're always not quite good enough. This is a very different basis, isn't it? Because when it's based on love, you're invested in those people, whatever.
yeah, and it is missing the mark. I know you you call yourself missing the mark, but it is. It is missing the mark. It's missing the whole point of this. You could be getting all the levels and results in the world, but if you're not loving the children, you've completely missed the point. You really have. I mean, even caseworkers. I mean, they should be have there should be some kind of love for these families there, but especially as a teacher, I just don't think there's any excuse.
No, and I think that these children have not felt good enough. I mean, can you imagine being a child who ends up not being in school with their friends?
Yeah, because no child wants that.
No.
Every child, like, and I think there's this rhetoric as well of children, families choosing to, right? Students choosing to not. No, all of them want to be there. Why would you not want to be with your friends and learning and thriving away from your family and kind of, why would you not want that? That isn't a thing. They're not choosing to. They can't do it. And can't not won't is one of your things, right?
Yeah.
One of your books. That is exactly it. It's not that they won't do it. They haven't been given the environment or the tools or the system in order to be able to access it.
And them accessing it might look very different as well. I think
Yes.
that's a really important point,
Yes,
that will look different. Same as our parenting will look different.
absolutely. Yeah, and inclusion doesn't have to mean 100% attendance.
No.
Included in every subject, in every environment, in everything. That isn't what we mean by inclusion. It is belonging. It is accepting. And that could mean one afternoon a week if it's not to benefit the school, it's to benefit the child. And I think that's the difference, isn't it? Is our reduced timetable to benefit the family, to benefit the child, then that's inclusion. If it's to
Yeah,
benefit school because they're a bit distracting from the rest of the class, that's exclusion. And yet it can look exactly the same on paper.
that's a really important point. And I speak to families who say they've had, months and months and months of just driving up to the school, dragging this child in so they can tick the attendance at school, and then off they go.
Not
I
in
mean, what's the
trouble.
point?
It's
And what
so
trauma are you causing doing
trauma.
that?
And also that trauma between breaking down the parent and child relationship, not just the school and the child. That's asking the parent to lose trust, lose loyalty, huge breakdown of relationship. And then what has the child got? If you haven't even got trust with the parent and that you feel like you're not even being understood by your own parents, you I mean, that poor child, they really haven't got anyone that then gets it. And that's just awful. And I know that pressure comes from the school. And then above that, it comes from the local authority. And above that, it comes from the government to the school, to the parent.
And that's why I talk about this repair and restore when we're at home. That's often what we're having to do as well. It's not just, repairing that child from those experiences, but it's also repairing our relationship with our child because we have often broken their trust.
Yeah, and it's a really good point that if you are in the position where you have a school refuser or, you're not attending school for whatever reason, please, 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 from a teacher, from the bottom of my heart, don't even think about work for ages. Just focus on building that relationship again. That is enough. That actually is what's needed.
I think for both the parents and the teachers, when you are trying to repair something, you have to be really mindful of sticking to your word and not breaking promises. Because one of the things I hear is that parents will often tell me they'll have an agreement with school that that child goes in for an hour, and then school will say to them, oh, they seem fine, don't worry, we'll keep them here all day. That's broken it. And that child will remember that. You broke your promise. School broke their promise, parents broke their promise. When we're doing this repairing, we must stick to that. If we are parenting and we say we're popping out, we're just going to the shop, I'll be 20 minutes, just be 20 minutes. These are all really important commitments that we make to our child to say, I'm sticking to my word, because when historically those words have been broken, that trust has been broken, we have to rebuild that by absolutely sticking to that,
Yeah.
what we say we mean.
And even if you don't say "I promise," any statement you give is a promise, especially with any anxious child. They will be looking for that. They need you to be concrete, and there is a huge weight to that as parents and teachers and those kind of advocates in your child's life
But
to
you can't
hold.
over egg it though. You can't do too much of that, particularly in the beginning. It's okay to be really preemptive with this stuff and say, talking out loud, for example, is a great way of doing it. Instead of talking out loud, oh, I'm just going into the kitchen to make a sandwich, they can hear you, and even in the house, because for those children where that attachment has been very much broken, it's about making that attachment again.
Yeah.
And
And
you
you're right,
can't
it can
overdo
be
it.
those micro promises, can't it? All throughout the day. I'm gonna do this and then I'm gonna do that and stick to it. And it could be tiny little things that you always do, but it's a little promise. And then gradually those promises can build and build and it can be bigger and bigger and bigger, can't it? Yeah, that's it's so true and it's so important because so many promises have been broken. And for the schools that, yes, I know I could understand totally what happened there. Oh, they're fine. They can just stay. But we've broken that promise. And what we're asking of that child is your everything, because it probably gave everything to get through that first hour, isn't enough. That's what we're telling them. That's the narrative that we're saying is, "I know you've given me everything. We want more from you." That isn't okay. Stop on the positive as well. Don't wait until it the children are forced to hurt themselves or others or damage the environment in order to actually listen to them, because they will. If can't say it because of either they're masking or they're non-speaking or for whatever reason, then they're gonna show it in their bodies, and what does that look like? It looks like, hurting behaviors, and we don't want to force children to do that. We want to go slowly. Yeah, we've had it before. I've had, a couple of school refusers in my class that have got to the school gate, didn't wanna get through, didn't wanna leave the car, is a really big one. So I've showed the timetable and I've really reduced it. I've said, "You just need to do these 2 things and then you go home." So that could have lasted 30 seconds, that could last half a day. It's up to them. And when we've got to them, they've seemed fine. "Oh, the TAs, oh, no, they're having their snack now, they seem fine." I've called the parent, "Oh, if they're okay." No, 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 because then it won't work tomorrow. We've lost them.
Yeah.
I have to take them home, and there's quite a lot of I have to take quite a lot of confidence with that because I'm trying to justify to my senior leadership team why we're sending this perfectly happy child home. But I knew that tomorrow, yes, they are fine, and they probably did wanna stay, but that tomorrow morning is gonna be the same, and then I can't use that visual timetable again because it means nothing, and I'll have to think of a different strategy, a different strategy, a different strategy. I have to stick to it.
Well, what also that's doing is that's giving that child that sense that they have some control over this. Often children will be saying things, it comes up a lot. They'll say things like, I felt trapped.
Mm,
And, I felt like I couldn't leave. And actually, to build up, they've got to feel like they can leave. We often talk about sort of saying things like, we can leave when you want to leave. And when they say, I want to leave now, cool,
go.
we'll leave now. Even if we have to rejuggle everything, that is what we have to do in the beginning.
And that's teaching the children that then become adults exactly what we were speaking about before of leaving a situation that doesn't feel good to them. We want them to be able to do that. We want them to leave a job that is toxic. We want them to be able to leave a relationship that is toxic. It's teaching them those skills, isn't it? And it's saying, we will listen to you. If we've said something doesn't feel good and it doesn't feel good and you advocate for yourself, whether that's through speaking, visual, whatever communication methods you use, you will be heard. My God, how much that is just teaching our children everything they need.
And how much would that immediately as well dissipate that distress as well? Because we often think that if we listen and validate that, then we're compounding the issue, don't we? Oh, it'll get worse. If I agree when they say their new teacher's too shouty, then they're never going to go and interact with that teacher. But if actually you can do that, you can say to them, that must be horrible when they shout, or talk about one of your experiences, that immediately lessens that thing for them, doesn't it?
Absolutely, it validates them, it's believing them, and whether they're able to say, I mean, I know I keep bringing it back to non-speaking, but I think it's important that this happens with all children. When your non-speaking children are saying they don't like something, in whatever way they show, believe them. There is a reason, there's something happening there. If they're refusing to want to go into the school building, there is a reason. They are communicating something to you. It could be easily fixed in the environment or whatever, but they are communicating something, so believe them, ultimately. and yeah, validate that communication because there will be a reason. Like we said at the start, it's can't, not won't. It's not they don't want to be there. There will be a reason.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Eliza. What current projects are you working on?
So the final edits, I have to say this as someone who is ADHD and autistic neurodivergent, there's always a lot of mistakes in my work, grammatical
Love that.
mistakes. So final edits have gone into my publisher. So we now have a publication date of May for my follow-up to Thumbsucker, which is very exciting. So that's Could Try
All
Harder.
about your teenage.
All about my teenage years. It was really hard to write, I have to say. I don't know if
It's
it's because
very
we're
open for you. It's very brave to share your own experience like that.
yeah, it was much harder than I thought because I suppose we're nearer to our teenage years. I went to another person, a friend's book launch, and they were talking about teenage years. And apparently, there's a reason we remember our teenage years more is also because there's a lot of new experiences that we're having as well. So they stick in our memory a lot more. But it was a going to places I probably hadn't gone to. So there's a kind of protectiveness, I suppose, that we all do around ourselves. We kind of tell the same stories and, they keep us safe, don't they? Well, this had to be a kind of really deep dive into lifting the lid, if you like, on those experiences.
What pushed you to want to share that story with the public? Was it for your own benefit? Was it because you feel like actually these are the stories that need to be told? What was that push to want to share that?
I always do it from a sort of self exploration first and foremost. And for me, I find that medium is a way I can do it much more than talking. I mean, I've done therapy for years on and off, but I still find that the writing and the drawing is a way that I can formulate a lot more than I can verbally. But also, I wanted to, suppose, show, I'm kind of in that next stage of perimenopause, menopause, and I'm seeing, as I always see patterns in things, being neurodivergent, I'm seeing women like me, and I want to explore what that is before we are what we are now, why we are getting to this place of suddenly wanting to lift the lid on things and rewrite things and do it a different way going forward. And I think we are those women that we were talking about earlier. We were those high achieving girls where that distress and those difficulties were absolutely not seen and led us on a very tricky path of perfectionism and people pleasing and a big loss of self doing that. I always sort of stuck to, because I've always had very strong interests, reading, writing, drawing, art. I've always sort of said, oh no, I've got a really strong sense of self. I kind of really held on to that. But actually unpicking it, I've realised behind that, it was very much about the validation of others first and foremost over my own self.
And
That
I
became
really
more important, actually.
absolutely. I really hope the more it is a conversation that we're having now, isn't it, with females and with neurodivergence that are realizing in adulthood why it has been always the way that we've been. And we're finally understanding how our brains work and what that is, because actually we can mask so much that we're even masking from our own selves. It's subconscious masking, I find, which is just really interesting. And now we're having that conversation. Now there's books and people talk about, and social media is in our pocket, and we can learn this stuff about ourselves and others and find that community in that way. I really am hopeful that in generations to come, other women coming through can start that journey a little bit earlier, have less trauma, understand a little bit more about themselves, have advocates and mentors that get it and understand and have lived that, like, all those kind of things that we maybe didn't have. I'm hopeful that by you writing your books and having your illustrations and other people sharing the same, that we can have that for the next generation,
I
really.
hope so. And I hope that we can get to a place where we can feel comfortable to share difficult bits, and I nearly said faults then, that's the wrong word, but I mean to show we make mistakes, you know? I think that there's such a fear of showing mistakes, and particularly when we've got children that we need to parent differently and we feel under a lot of scrutiny with that. All of that ramps up those early experiences, doesn't it? And I think we just need to kind of lift the lid on all of that stuff and feel okay to do that, but it's going to take lots more people doing that. And I think I'm still sort of struggling with there's still a kind of thing out there around neurodivergence where you have to be wonderful or brilliant or gifted or something. And I want to say, what if you're not? What if you just want to be really average and watch crappy telly
And that is
and
perfectly okay. Yeah,
yeah.
it's so true. I think it's in, media, isn't it, that if autism is mentioned, they have to have a gift in something, almost to be worthy of being seen or having the story written about them. They have to be gifted. The recent Disney film with the girl using AAC, the high-tech AAC, really frustrated me because she was an AAC user and incredibly gifted and intelligent. And I think, well, yeah, that's awesome for her. Like, she's found her voice. But my kids are worthy too, and they have cognitive disabilities, and they can't do that, but they're still worthy of a whole Disney film made about them. I felt the same about the telepathy tapes. I don't know if you've heard about the telepathy
I
tapes.
have, yeah.
I felt the same about them. Like, that's wonderful for these kids that they're finding a voice and being understood. But my kids deserve a whole podcast about them too, and they can't do that. They're just as worthy. So it's that weird like thing, and I'm really playing with that at the moment as well of that feeling of being worthy of that story is just, yeah, something I'm playing with right now because I'm, yeah, incredibly passionate that all of
Well,
my
it feels like it's other people saying what is acceptable, isn't it, as well with that, you know, because we've got a lot of sort of high profile people now talking about their neurodivergence and they all look really polished and really brilliant. And you're like, well, what about that person I remember I worked with for a bit who used to, you know, I don't know, chew the sleeves of their jumper or didn't actually talk to anyone. You know, there's a still a acceptable version is what I'm trying to say of what that should look like. And actually, I think we should just accept anyone for who they are and where they're at and
Yeah,
what they're
and that
doing. And
acceptance, it just stops there, doesn't it? It
yeah.
reminds me, I once had a visitor in my class. It was a supply teaching assistant, and I was showing them, who we got in our class, and they said to this one child, "Oh, so what are they good at?" Always like, there's a thing, like, and I was just completely dumbfounded by this question. I was like, well, they're really, really great at finding shiny paper and stimming it to particularly bit in the light that they really enjoy, like, was what I found. And I which is true, they're brilliant at doing that. But I was a bit like, why is that the question? Like, I just thought that was just, yeah, it really just took me back. So yeah, what you were saying there just reminds me of that of like, I'm sure, like, I don't know, just, yeah, all
Well,
just,
that's the other thing that I've been working. So that's out in May. That book, but the what I've been working on that's still at proposal stage is I'm working on a children's book because I met someone when I was doing my work at Cambridge University, and they were doing their PhD in about autonomy in children's books, and they were talking about how obviously they're written by adults, so there's always a hidden agenda to that. And I get sent so many books to read and review, and sometimes there's children's books in that around kind of neurodivergence, and I have to say that most of them I cannot bear them because I can see this agenda that is, to get this well-behaved child to do what parents want them. There is still that kind of Victorian narrative, but written in a jolly way, and they bug me. And luckily I've worked with Chelsea Luca, and I'm doing her second book, which is much more she gets it and she's on the right page. But there was a reason I wanted to write my own children's book, because I thought I don't like this icky feeling that these children's books give me.
and what are we telling our children that we're reading that to if that's our story of what neurodivergence is? Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, it's definitely something that I haven't worked out yet, but I'm definitely playing with this idea of yeah, something to do with
Well,
that.
often it starts with that, doesn't it? It starts with this sense of I've got this sense of something's not quite right.
Right, and I don't know what it is, but I will do something about it. Yeah, at the moment it's just rants on my Instagram story, but I'm sure it will end up something better than that. Thank you so much for joining me today, Eliza. It's been an absolute joy talking to you. I resonate so much with what you've said, and I really hope that listeners do as well. Where can people find you if they wanted to find your books and illustrations, just more information about what's to
Yeah,
come
so I've
for
got a
you?
website, missingthemark.co.uk, and you can just look me up. Just look up Eliza Fricker or Missing the Mark, and you'll find me lurking about.
Amazing. And yeah, definitely follow. Your illustrations are fantastic, highly shareable, and yeah, I just every single one just makes me smile or angry. It just makes me feel something, which I love that about your stuff. Thank you so much, Eliza. Have a good
Thank
day.
you.